With some of the most interesting, innovative game changers in business today. We get to hear their views straight from the horse's mouth. Let me give you a front row seat to some of the best conversations from stages all over the world. Join me now for Executive Perspectives.
In today's world, disruption and changes are everywhere. We're living in a time where ideas and innovation are driving businesses, and jobs may be diminishing as computers become more advanced. But what is disruption, and is it a good thing? To find out the answer, I turn to the leading expert in the field and CEO of Sea Change International, Jay Samit. We sat down at the C-Suite conference in Boston to define disruption and the key factors all disruptive companies have in common. Plus, Jay outlined the 3 tactics every company needs to adapt before they die.
Jay, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I've had you on the radio show, and I think people are a little worried about getting the two of us together on television because of the disruption that you cause and I cause.
Well, the world needs some change.
It does need change. Let me first of all say congratulations on the book. Runaway bestseller.
Thank you.
I mean, it's just been tremendous. Have you been surprised about how well the book has been picked up?
I've heard from people in over 100 countries. So, yes, and that's not like a bragging. That's like, it touches a nerve. Right now, when you look at the world's largest hotel company, owns no hotels. The world's largest transportation company owns no cars. The world's largest media company is Facebook. It creates no media. World's largest retailer is Alibaba. They have no inventory.
And then the first two you're talking about, Airbnb and Uber.
Yeah. And we're living this era of endless innovation and massive job destruction. I mean, 3D printing will eliminate 320 million manufacturing jobs. Autonomous vehicles, tens of millions of people. That's the number one job as a truck driver. Office automation, by the way, folks, half of middle management will be gone within 5 years. Gone.
I can see that.
And so you can either look at this like, oh my God, the sky is falling, life is over, or the greatest time to start a business or a new product because you're now connected to 6 billion people. You're one click away from a market that has never existed before.
You think most people look at, though, I think they look at it more pessimistic than they do optimistic.
So unfortunately, in most of the C-suites that I visit around the world, and I've consulted to governments and many of the largest Fortune 500 companies, what got you in the corner office, you figure, is the way it is, and you're going to do that until you're in a pine box. And unfortunately, you're taking the company with you in that pine box. You know, in the book, I talk about Kodak. I was one of the senior management running Sony when it was a $100 billion company. And they had their silos, and they didn't talk, and they didn't see, on the golf course in Tokyo, they didn't see Apple. They saw Panasonic as their competition and like-minded companies. And the rate of pace of change has never been this fast. But the tools at your disposal, just imagine, you don't have to be right for a nanosecond to become a billionaire. And that's why you see so many self-made billionaires in their 20s. It's really that easy.
What is different today than it was back then? I mean, you've been through it a number of decades, and I mean, you're at Universal, EMI, you started Uvu, you were president of Uvu.
Yeah, Uvu, for those that don't know, is if you have a 14-year-old, it's Skype for teens. I was head of the number one app used by teens. The major difference was you used to, as a big brand, be able to use blunt force trauma. Meaning you could spend billions of dollars and get that message out and just saturate, okay?
And we did business the way we wanted people to do business with us. I mean, we forced them to 800, I call it to 800 numbers and some sadistic
Right, but whatever the message was, if there was anybody with a counter message, you could drown it out, okay? If you look at the presidential campaign, they're not spending on television like before.
Right.
It is who is winning social media, and I had a company...
Or media.
But it's social media that is where they're winning. And 4 years ago, I wrote a white paper saying that this would happen, and had 4 presidential candidates as clients, because you can now customize your message to each individual. You know who that individual is before they raise their hand and say who they are. And if you think this is changing, your billboards now in real time, your digital billboards, can know who's driving based on what's in the cars, and change the messaging to, so we're going to Minority Report.
Well, geofencing, everything. I mean, it's going to be a major move for a lot of people. But why do you think that's different? You think social media is the thing?
Oh, social media, absolutely. Because what social media does is allows everyone to have an equal voice. And we don't get our news filtered or gathered by an individual. You know, it's not Walter Cronkite saying this is the way it is. It's our peer group filtering like-minded stuff. So if you're getting misinformation, you're surrounding yourself with other people getting misinformation.
So when you talk about disrupt you and you talk about being a disruptor, what is a disruptor? Is it a pain in the ass in the company?
A lot of people get disruption and innovation confused. So my classic example is back from the Bronze Age, we figured out how to make knives and then longer swords, and kingdoms and kings were all sword fighting, broadswords, all kinds of stuff. And then there's that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones on the streets of Cairo.
That's great.
The big Arab with the scimitar comes out, and then he just pulls out the Smith & Wesson and goes boom. That's disruption. It's a change where you never go back. Nobody's talking about swords anymore. Okay. The same thing with businesses. Kodak in 1975 invented.
Why do you keep bringing up Kodak all the time?
It was a great example. They invented the digital camera.
Yeah.
But it didn't have the profit margin of film.
Right. Correct.
So whoever was assigned to the digital camera was assigned to the wasteland of we're never going to fund you.
Right.
Now you're seeing that it is so easy to come up with a change, and you can have a global market very quickly. Social is a cheaper way of marketing, and you need to change your mindset. And you have some great speakers about this, but first of all, you have to get over the fear of failure. Failing is the only way to become successful. So the difference between failing and failure, failing is figuring out what doesn't work. Our symbol of genius is the light bulb, right? Edison was, I found 10,000 ways that didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Right. And then.
But it was 10,000 ways to make a better light bulb.
Right. And when you look at, people like Walt Disney or Heinz and these big brand names that we know, they all went bankrupt before they became billion-dollar companies. The failure is throwing in the towel and saying, I give up.
So what do disruptive companies have in common?
In empowering people to be allowed to make a mistake. So I'll give everybody the two tips that I've been using for 20 years in running my businesses. Anybody that reports to me, I tell them two things on day one. First, you don't work for me, I work for you. Your job is to tell me what you need to be successful. My job is to give it to you and get out of your way. So it's not micromanaging, it's not telling people, hire the best people, the brightest minds, you should be the dumbest person in every room.
Typically, I'm not trying to make a joke, but we're not the smartest people in the room. I used to say that about the C-suite, that the smartest people in the room. I think it's the role of the C-suite to be the most strategic people in the room.
Well, and be open. I mean, Steve Jobs never wrote a line of code. People think he was the technologist. Perfect example. The second rule is, if you work for me for a year and you do not make a mistake, I will fire you. Because it means that you're not willing to push the boundaries.
Not causing enough tension.
And most of the products, if I use Apple as a great example, Apple was a failed computer company. They could never get past 3% market share. So Steve smartly went and well, what if I try a consumer electronics product? And he thought he'd get killed, and iPod did well. Let's try a phone. They're coming out with tennis shoes next year. Because when you walk, you make kinetic energy, and you will now use your walking to charge all your wearables. So they're getting into cars, not to sell iron and tires. They're not competing against Ford and that. But you're not going to be driving now. You're not going to be staring out a windshield. So it's an entertainment system. It's an ad delivery system. It is knowing all the data about you.
So when you look at, as an executive who may not need or want to disrupt an entire industry, why is it important for my company?
So what you have to look at is, what is the key problem that your company is solving and for whom? And what is changing on that audience? And that could be a B2B business, that could be a B2C. It doesn't make a difference. You're solving somebody's problem, but problems aren't static. We have new tools, new ways. So unless you're adapting, there's somebody else that will fill that gap and be able to do it usually by a tenfold increase.
You talked about the level, an entire level of middle management that's going to be cut out. So if I'm sitting out there and I were middle management, which this group is not, but you've got people that work for you, well, how can someone prepare for it?
First thing, commit to lifelong learning, and I know you're a big proponent of this. Would you go to a doctor my age that hadn't learned anything since medical school?
No.
20-some years. You're going to you don't know all the
Not
drugs.
if you want to die, unless you really do want to die.
Yeah. So why should anybody hire or work or think that you're a valuable employee if you haven't continued to learn and adapt? The world has fundamentally changed and continues to change. The second key is to keep that open mindset of, just because you don't think it'll work, there's somebody you have to invite to every meeting that most people forgot to invite. And that's data. Data doesn't lie. Data has no ego. You think the button should be red, I think it should be right. You do a quick test, boom. It's like tacking when you sail.
Right, but it's the biggest problem about data is no one uses it. I mean, you got it all there. I mean, the airline knows that I am a frequent flyer and I do hundreds of thousands of miles, and all of a sudden I stop that airline and go to another airline, but yet I never get a letter from the old airline.
I'll give you a great example of that, taking data and good marketing and putting it together real simple. Richard Branson does this just naturally, and he imbues because his brand is Virgin. It's about, we're going to make mistakes, we're new. All of us have been at airports when a flight's late, it's delayed, we're in a bad mood, and more, that consumer is out there tweeting. They're in real time, especially at Heathrow, their hub, looking, and if somebody says something, they then search on social media, try to find a picture of them, and they just send somebody with a little box of chocolates, a little whatever, because they know that's a vocal voice. And that voice then turns into a broadcaster of how much they love the brand.
Does that become creepy?
Not to the generation that's out there.
Yeah. So, I don't think it's creepy. I actually think it's a great way of serving them.
I mean, I tweet at Jay Samit. I have 100,000 plus business leaders that follow because they're trying to learn the latest and greatest.
So I take the things that you're saying, which to me they make sense, right? But how do I pursue these big ideas or opportunities? How do I sit there and say, okay, I'm middle level management, or I'm the brand new CEO of this company. How do I put this in place?
So let me start, because it's two different approaches, and I just took over a company, so I'll answer the second afterwards.
And you're in it, by the way, let's just talk about this, but Sea Change, very disruptive.
Yeah.
In terms of its OTT, it's changing the way we look at broadcast.
For 20 years, we're the people that invented video on demand when you order a movie on your cable system. So all the cable companies around the world are our customers. But we know where cable's going.
But beyond cable, it's also about putting any of that traditionally broadcast content onto a digital device.
TV networks can skip cable and go straight to your phone.
Yeah, which is what we do at C-Suite TV.
Right. And now content creators can skip the three-letter guys and go straight to your phone. And talent can say, like Jon Stewart could say, I don't need to work for Comedy Central. Right. I can keep all the pie and go direct, and sports leagues, and et cetera, et cetera. And devices are now saying, why do I need any of them? I'll come buy this brand TV and get 5 years of NFL. So our TAM, total market completely exploded, but I have a sales force that was used to just calling on cable companies. How do you change that mindset? How do you empower people? How do you incentivize, And part of it's carrot, part of it's stick. You take over companies and there's silos of, this is my turf, you're not going to mess with it.
Do you have to replace the staff?
Many times. With the silo mentality, that's real easy. The second you cut off the heads, everybody pretty much realizes they either get on board or they don't. For the middle person, the big fear is always, my boss doesn't get it or my boss doesn't want it, and if I go above him, if I break rank, if I do something, I'll lose my job. Folks, you're going to lose your job if the company doesn't evolve, because the company's going to go out of business. So you're actually risking nothing, Everybody talks about,
I was going to say, isn't that just that's just a common kind of misconception, because you really don't lose your job. In fact, the C-suite are looking for people who do that.
100%. If you had the guts to reach out to the CEO and I can do chapter and verse of stories of this, and they are so far removed from the mass. They're thankful. I'm thankful when I get information. I didn't know there was that problem. Oh, and you came to me not with a problem in a wine, because I get all those all day long.
We get them complaints all the time.
But a solution. I'll give a great example. Sony, giant company. Sir Howard Stringer, great chairman, was brought in, and he came in from a different company.
He did a good job, and he did a great job. Howard was
and they instantly wired his apartment in Manhattan with every Sony product, and 9,000 remote controls, and didn't know how to do any of it. And they sent this very low level but very nice person to go do it. And she said, our best customers all have this problem. If we had a concierge service, they'd buy all Sony products. And right then and there, he made her head of a new division, and every celebrity loved. They didn't care about the price. They cared about, they wanted the best things, but nobody would ever show them how to use it. So it's really being that open and keep that open mindset and keep that positive attitude. Most of your day when you make it to the C-suite is putting out fires, from morning till night. Shareholders, employees, everybody.
Your day is not your own.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also not the kindest bunch of email, okay? Yeah. But having that positive mindset actually does the same thing as being on drugs. It releases dopamine, okay? And dopamine goes across those neurotransmitters and lights up your brain like a Christmas tree. And suddenly you see possibilities, you see ideas and everything. When you go the other direction and you shut down, you will never find a solution to problems. So I took over a company that's been around 20 years. It had focused on just one market, lost its way as the market expanded, and did 14 quarters of losses. So there was a mentality within the company of, Now we're profitable. Now we're recruiting the best and the brightest.
What's the shift in revenue?
Haven't announced we're in a quiet period, so I can't answer that right now.
Okay, fair enough.
Transparency is really good unless you're a public CEO.
And that, you know what, which sucks some days, right? It really does.
It absolutely does, because I don't look good in stripes. But let me put it this way. What changes and what you have to do and what leadership is all about is, I said, wait a second, I can give all the speeches of theory and I'll talk about it, but I'm going to go out and pound the pavement and bring in that first sale in the new area. I'm going to show that it can be done.
You lead by example on that?
Yeah.
Figure?
And then...
Did you really do that?
Oh, absolutely. I did that. And I did that at Sony. I did that.
You did it all. But you were EVP, you were business development. That's where a lot of your experience came from that. Not everybody has that same experience.
Well, I spent my first 20 years running my own business until I sold. So I never had a boss. So I'm at a loss to everybody that's worked their way up. I'm a horrible employee. But I never have a fear of failure, because it's okay, it doesn't work. Then you try something else. That was innate to me. As I work around the globe, culturally, that's the one advantage America still has, is we grew up with cultural icons that failed. Lucy would try get rich quick thing and would fail.
And many of them are run for president.
Right. I wasn't going to go there. Homer Simpson, the same thing. The rest of the world, if you fail, no one's going to invest in you again. You're ostracized. Mm-hmm. And it's that willingness to try. I mean, we were a country made up of people that wanted something better, that came here, that were explorers. And
we fought for it.
And unfortunately, then we became settlers and we're settling. And that's why I wrote Disrupt You, to really teach people that the secret at the end of the day is you first have to look at yourself differently. Okay? If you can change yourself, then you realize you can change your business and your parameters and all those things, and the world. And that's all it really takes.
All right. So talk to me about SOLOMO.
Oh, okay. So you get to learn a word today, SOLOMO. Social, local, and mobile. If those three components aren't in what you're doing, and I don't care what business you're in, you're making huge mistakes. So the first is social. Social is a 24/7 live dialogue with your customers, your employees, your brand.
Your community. It's everything.
And if you're not out there as a leader and they don't know what you're doing, where you're doing. So I have some people that go, Jay, why are you on Twitter? You're supposed to be running a company. I go, yes, that's why I'm on Twitter. Okay? People know what we're doing, know where we're going. You're getting to narrate what you want to, we had a horrible board meeting. They just said no. Local is, we're now able to reach everywhere, which is intimidating. So find a local market. And that doesn't necessarily have to be geographically. It could be demographically. Make it work there, and then you'll find endless resources. That's what, when everybody goes, how do these private unicorns, these startups that get hundreds of millions of dollars in funding and have never made a profit? Because they proved it here and said, if you give me this, I can scale it to there. And it's rinse and repeat. And then mobile,
it's everything.
We have a CNN broadcasting system in our pocket, okay? Mm-hmm. You're one click away from 6 billion people. You only have to be right for a nanosecond. Just once. And your great-grandchildren won't have to work for a living. I mean, it's an amazingly powerful combination. They all give you constant data so you can tack and figure out what your solution is.
Do you have any idea what you think is going to be the most disruptive piece that's going to come in that SOLOMO?
So there's a few big things that are impacting right now. People have no idea how much impact 3D printing is going to have. Mm-hmm. This isn't the hype of a little printer make little toys for your kids.
It's not yet. I mean, a lot of people think that's what it is, though.
The big change, because you can do it in metal, you're 3D printing...
do it with food.
You're doing human tissue. Guy just had a 3D printed nose. He lost a nose in an accident, a skin graft put on. 3D printed kidneys.
Prosthetics as well.
Prosthetics. Quick prosthetic story. This is one of my favorite, again, a reader from the book, and I love this. So if heaven forbid you had a child that was missing a limb, okay? You can't get them a couple $100,000 prosthetic because they grow too fast. They won't get a new hand until they're
a great example.
15, 16, 17. Right. Now for under $1,000, they can get. Mm-hmm. But with just-in-time manufacturing and everything, this person went to Disney for a license. And now you can get a Frozen arm or a Stormtrooper arm or an Iron Man arm. So the kid goes from being less than to being the coolest kid. How does that change their self-esteem? How does that change the potential? I mean, what they'll create in this world will be so much better because they were able to be involved. So the message there is we've gone from mass manufacturing to custom manufacturing. And there's many more custom needs. So it's greater market potential.
And greater margins.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, it's good margins as well.
That's a huge change, the sharing economy. So we've gone from consuming to, when I give a keynote, I ask how many people have an electric drill, and pretty much everybody raised their hand. According to the Drill Makers Association, in your lifetime, you will drill for 18 minutes. You know, IKEA bookcase. Does it make sense to schlep this thing around your whole life? No.
No.
If somebody could deliver it in the morning and pick it up in the afternoon, well, your car spends most of its time parked too. The biggest thing facing Detroit right now is millennials don't ever want to own a car. They see it as a hassle, and they're right, and it doesn't make economic sense. So sharing things, again, local, using data to connect, and you'll see this on all kinds of new businesses.
This has been an episode of Executive Perspective with Jeffrey Hayzlett, and I've been joined with Jay Samit, CEO of Sea Change International and the best-selling book, Disrupt You.